Welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie, a slice of faith for our messy lives. I'm Tony Kolenc, a professor at Ave Maria School of Law, father of 5 grown children, and the author of inspirational fiction for teens and adults. On that note, I'm thrilled to say that the 5th book in my teen historical fiction series, The Harwood Mysteries, is now available just in time for the holidays. It's a medieval murder mystery called Murder at Penwood Manor. So check out my website for details on that. But today we are speaking with another great author, Tim Shoemaker, about his newest release in the High Water series. And we're going to talk a little bit about how faith can also help us combat self-destructive behavior. It is my great pleasure today to welcome as my guest Tim Shoemaker. He's an award-winning author of numerous books, including The Deep End, Escape from the Everglades, and his very popular Code of Silence series. He's also a speaker at schools, churches, homeschool and writers conventions, and he even conducts family devotion workshops all over the country. Now, his latest release, which we'll talk about today, is called The Second Storm. It's published by Tyndale, and it is the 4th book in the High Water series. Tim, welcome to the Shepherd's Pie.
Tony, I'm glad to be here.
I am very glad to have you on the show. And, you've got so much going on in your background there. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe how you came into writing and maybe even some of the speaking that you do in your ministry?
Well, the writing, I had no intention of being a writer. That was never a dream of mine. But I did like telling stories to my kids. So I'd just be making up stories as we went. And I'd hear a lot of, "Dad, you should write this down." And Tony, I had no interest in that. I thought, I'm not even going to remember this by the time I'd go to write it down. But one time I tried and found out I loved it. I had no idea. And that started a journey of learning to write and learning to write better and better and working on that for years. And so it was a desire in my heart that I didn't know was there. And God planted that. So that's been so wonderful. And the speaking was kind of similar to that. I didn't see that on the horizon. When I switched over to writing, I thought that was going to be it. The writing was something God had planned. And so the first time I spoke someplace, I was scared to death. And I'm always a little nervous, right? I was so scared. But when I'd finished, it was like inside I knew this was something I never knew I always wanted. It was like I was made for this. And I felt like, oh my goodness, God has been preparing this for me. And I didn't even know it. So yeah, that started a journey. So it has a lot to do with how to teach our kids, our grandkids about God in ways that they listen. And so that's a lot of object lesson and activity type books that work even for teens. There's also a lot of speaking maybe to men's groups, once in a while a retreat, and then to a lot of writers' conferences and homeschool conferences as well.
What was your life before you became a writer? What did you do in your professional life?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was in the photo finishing industry. We developed film, we printed pictures. My wife and I had a 1-hour photo mini lab and studio. You remember those? I mean, they've disappeared almost 20 years ago. That's the business I was in. In fact, I was 3rd generation in the photo finishing. And now I could be talking to at a junior high or whatever, and I could pull out a roll of film, like an undeveloped roll of film and show them and ask them if they know what it is. It is the craziest thing, Tony, because we know what it is. We grew up with this. They have no idea. And some of the guesses they make, they're just wild. And they can't imagine that somebody would shoot a camera and you were limited to a 12, 24, or a 36 shot experience, and that you have to reload it at that point. It boggles our mind. Yeah, that was our background. And I loved it. But in the end, I was losing my shirt because more and more people were doing the digital thing. And as much as I love that, I love what God prepared for me next that I had no idea was there.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, it's quite a different career change you made there. Now you've written other series. I know I mentioned the Code of Silence series, but The one that's been coming out, and you're on book 4 now, is this High Water series, and it's
Yeah.
set in South Florida. Now, I don't know if you know this, but where I teach at Ave Maria is in fact, South Florida, just north of the Everglades.
Oh,
Yeah, tell us a little bit about just the series itself, and why did you set it in South Florida? Because I'm pretty sure you don't live here in South Florida.
no, I don't. I live in the Midwest. And the first series took place in the Midwest because I wanted to write in an area that I really knew well. But the second series, I thought, I like writing mystery, adventure, suspense, thriller type writing. And in my mind, what could be scarier than alligators? Right. So I thought, wow, what if I set it there? What a creepy place. No offense, Tony, to your backyard there, but it can be a creepy place. And so I decided that I would start the series there. It has to do with a park ranger's son. And of course, his dad is stationed there in the Everglades. Now, here's the crazy story about it is I went down there for research, spent some time there, and honestly had some close calls because I was taking some risks. I thought I cannot come back to do more research. Next time I may not make it back. Only by God's grace did I get out of there. He's a
Well,
park
next
ranger's
next
son.
time you come down, you need to come visit me, and I'll go with you. I want to see some alligators in the wild.
Okay. Yes. Well, you don't want to do some of the things that I ended up doing. My wife nearly died when she heard some of the stories later. Anyway, the thing of it was, I thought I can't come back for book 2 to do more research. He's a park ranger's son. His dad's going to get a new station. So then we shifted for book 2. We went up just north of Boston. There's some national park things there right in Boston. So his dad gets a transfer. But that premise in the first one, this boy gets mauled by a gator. His dad puts in for a transfer. And for the rest of that book, he's got one friend that wants to get him back in the glades, get back on the horse type of thing. And he's got another friend that's going to do everything she can to keep him out. And when somebody goes missing in the glades, a friend, he's going to join that search and be in more danger than ever. So it makes for an exciting read. But yes, at book 2, we move on.
Now, the one that is just coming out, The Second Storm, is the 4th book, I guess, but it brings you back to South Florida because doesn't it have a hurricane? You're really near and dear to our heart here now. A Category 5 hurricane hitting South Florida. That's something we're very familiar with. Maybe tell us about what's going on in the newest one.
I started writing that one before the hurricane hit. Unfortunately, then as I'm working on that book, one hit, and it was, like you say, very close to home. The idea is, we've got Parker. He's up north now, but he still has a friend down there. And so even though he got out of the glades and he doesn't want to go back, he's got somebody who's going to be in it. And that brings this choice. Am I going to go back down to help? Go back to a place I never wanted to go back to again? So we've got that dynamic, but it's not that storm. This isn't like a national disaster type storybook. It's really the second storm. It's what's going on after that and beyond that. That's what puts him in the greatest danger of all.
Tell us a little bit about your main character or your main characters. You mentioned Parker now a few times. How old is he? What's he like? Is he a Christian kid?
When we start the series, he's 14. As we're wrapping up the series, there'll be 5 books in all, and he'll be 16 there. So it's a pretty tight window. One of the reasons I did that, it allows me to be real about teenage things, but I'm not going to go into the area of dating or anything like that. I don't have to hit those kinds of issues. He's a park ranger's son, only child there. And there's another park ranger family that there's a girl there and they've been friends. And these 2 guys are buddies. They try to get stationed at the same place as they move from national park to national park. Now, Parker is a Christian. He lives in a Christian home. He's a pretty well-balanced kid. And one of the things that I like to do, Tony, is and when I'm teaching other writers, I try to encourage them. Don't try to just write a Christian novel, because as soon as you do, you're gonna get in trouble, because you're going to start likely getting a little agenda driven, and it can get preachy, or it can have those believability issues and some of those things that are problems, right? Or there's certain things that they feel need to be in there to make it a Christian novel. Well, we have to have a conversion scene, or we have to have a Jesus figure, or something like that, right? And sometimes that's exactly what makes the story hokey. And we don't want hokey Christian fiction. And so what I do is I just want to write a great story with real characters, but make at least one of them a Christian at whatever various level of stage, of his faith. And so as the series starts out, he's got a family friend. I would say she's marginal Christian at best. She's familiar with it, but it's not really a big part of her life. His other friend, Christianity has no part of his life, probably never will. But so we've got these different characters at different stages. And I think that's what makes it especially good, because no matter where our reader's at, they can identify with somebody, but we're showing them a better way. There is help, there is hope when somebody is with the Lord. And so we weave that in. And so the same thing happens as he travels north. He'll have friends there that are not Christians. One will become a Christian as time comes on, but we see everybody moving a little bit closer towards it, not as antagonistic against it. And I think that's more real, and that's important.
So, and yeah, I have the same situation. I set my books in medieval times in England, and it just so happens the kid is at a Benedictine abbey after he gets orphaned. So it's hard not to have sort of Christianity around when you're in that setting, and it makes it very easy to be organic, but not quite as much if you're in the Everglades, I suppose. So what would be maybe some of the types of Christian themes that you're able to kind of explore in the series, and especially maybe in the second storm?
Well, there's all kinds of themes. We talk about fear and even purpose for life. And there's so much to do with parent involvement. How much do we have parents involved? And that's tricky. As you know, Tony, when we're writing, and obviously in the story you just mentioned, we don't have a parent involved. So when we have a story where there are parents, what kind of a role do we give them? And I want to be very careful with that, because God gave us parents for a reason. And we need our parents, but we have to open up to them. And so I'm really careful not to make parents look like idiots because they're not. That to me is a lazy writing technique that so many do it, whether we see it in movies or books. They make parents look like buffoons, like they're just so biased and so out of it. And it's the kids that have to really set things straight. And that's really upside down. And so we want to do it in a way where parents aren't necessarily coming up with the solutions, but the reader can't help but see the value of a Christian parent and see the value of opening up and talking to them and how that can help. Different themes. That's certainly a thing that's part of it. We talk about the bad choices and show what happens when kids make choices. And so much of it is we could all make bad choices, right? We're all self-destructive in our heart. And I think it's even more so with teenagers, because they lack some of the experience. They lack some of the wisdom. They lack some of the long-term vision of what's going to happen if they go down this road. So yeah, that's one of the themes there too, just that destructive behavior, the bad choices, misunderstandings with one another, when things aren't really communicated well. People say something, but they're not saying everything that they're thinking, and that can lead to real trouble. So I know I'm giving you a whole bunch of different things there, but yeah, those are some of the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on a really important one, especially, I mean, maybe it's always been this way, but it seems to me that in our teens today, the self-destructive behavior is particularly bad. I mean, we see, girls heavy cutting and things like that. You see, obviously, drugs and other things. So what were some of the self-destructive themes your characters had to deal with in the series?
If somebody feels like they've made a mess of something or their life is messed up, they can think that that's it. They don't see that there's still a future. They don't realize that times of feeling like junk are part of life. And oftentimes that's to drive us to a certain point, to do something not self-destructive, but to come to some sort of realization, to reach out beyond ourselves, whether it's reaching to an adult or a mentor in our life. Ultimately, it would be steering us to the Lord. So oftentimes we can see where a character is making some bad choices. They think this is the end, and you know what? They're going to do something dramatic, and it's going to hurt them even more, but they really don't care because they think their life is over anyway. They think that life will never be good after whatever it is that's happened has happened, or they've lost certain friendships, or they're no longer trusted, or they mess up in some big way. We want to show them that there is hope and help, and the importance of not only our readers recognizing some of that in others and being a good friend to them, but also when that happens in their life. Sometimes feeling like junk is just so part of life. I mean, think about Moses, right? He was in a position to help his people, and he messed up when he killed that Egyptian. And next thing you know, he's on the run. And I imagine at that point, he felt like junk. He felt like he would never have another chance to help his people. But God didn't want Moses to use his position to make life easier on his people. He had a much bigger plan. He wanted Moses to set his people free. And God took that messed up man and turned him into one of the greatest leaders of all time. And so that's one of the messages that subtly we want to get across to the kids, right? In our writing, that there are times you're going to feel like this is the end, that all is lost, that nothing good could come from this. But you've got to trust God because he's got a plan. And I think that's one of those ways that we can help with all the self-destructive things that we can do or kids can do, is to remind them that God has a plan. I mean, Ephesians 2:10, it talks about things that God has prepared for us to do. And I think when readers begin to think, wow, that could even be for me, the more they are curious about what might God have for me, the more that'll help them seek God, and he'll start revealing things to them. So it's subtle. The power of a story is so strong. And so we let the story influence our readers. Our kids, they're smart. So I don't write down to them. I know they're smart, but they lack experience, so they make dumb choices. And I want them to gain wisdom, right? And we gain wisdom often through experience, especially when that is coupled with God's word. And so in a story, we can give them experiences of people who make certain choices, and they can see what the results of that are. And they have just gained experience. They have just gained wisdom. And hopefully they don't have to make those same mistakes, right?
The other theme that I like to hit on that I think is related to what you've been saying is the verse from Romans that God, make all things good for those who love him. And, even the mistakes and the self-destructive things that people do, God will find a way to turn them into something good later. And it's good to I like to explore that a little bit also. But I wanted to ask if any of these, you write what you know. You talked about writing the Midwest because you know it. When you were exploring some of these themes in your characters, are you drawing any of that from real life, either from your own personal life or people you knew or grew up with? Or, where did you kind of get the inspiration for some of those problems that the kids are going through?
My wife and I have worked with high school students. We started right when we got married. We continued to work with them for a lot of years. And we took a little hiatus when our kids were a certain age and then went right back into it. So we've had lots of years working with youth. So you see some of these things for one, but yes, you're always drawing from your own life, your own experience, or things you've seen to people in people's lives that are close to you. And that's where I think some of the issues of fear, discouragement, insecurity, these come in. I think those are pretty universal things, but when you've experienced those, your writing can be that much more real. We don't want to just hit this with some kind of Christian sugar coating that makes it look like, oh, everything's great because you're Christian. No, our God is great. Life is messy, and he can help us through these things. We want to illustrate that. So I don't necessarily plan it all out ahead of time. So I'm one of those writers. And I might be over halfway through, and all of a sudden I have this aha moment. It's like, this is what the story is really about. So there's some sort of a reveal there to me. Now, as I rewrite and I go back, I'm going to write more to that theme. But I try not to state a theme or come up with a theme before I start writing. I want a great story, and I want to know these characters really well. And a theme will generally rise up out of that. And then it is more organic that way, and it doesn't feel agenda driven. At least that's how I do it.
Yeah, some of the best writing, I think, in my books all came out of that kind of a thing. I do try to plan things out a little more than you do, but I'm very much very loose about it. And I can't help but notice somewhere, and I always attribute it to the Holy Spirit because that's the only thing I can imagine. Somewhere in the middle of the story, something just starts happening, and you're like, wait, I could do this. And oh, and then you're like, and that will lead to this. And then that will, the next thing you know, you've got this whole shift in your book that you didn't plan. And that's the best part of the darn book. And that's been the way I've experienced it.
That is so true. I am so with you on that, Tony. And don't you love that? And it surprises us. And then our drive to write increases even more because we want to see what happens with this. But there have been characters like in the series we're talking about. There's a character he's not introduced till book 2, and he's the sidekick of like a minor antagonist. And so he was never destined for anything, really, other than just somebody that this other guy would hang out with. And something happened. By the end, it was part of his backstory. And there's a little shift that happens to him at the end of the second book. And that's it.
Well, let me ask you this then. You talked about working with your wife and with teens, and that might be where you drew some of these. I mean, I'll be interested to hear. I mean, if you drew actual experiences in some of the self-destructive behavior or not from those experiences. But I'm also interested in real life, what did you say and what did your wife say to these kids when you saw them heading in the wrong direction? And what are your characters telling each other that you think would be valuable for parents to know if they have one of their kids or their kids' friends who are exhibiting those kinds of self-destructive behaviors?
If it's one of their kids' friends, if I'm talking to a student and he's got a friend going in a bad direction, I would encourage him to love them, to listen to them, to try to draw them out, really understand where they're coming from. And you're going to try to encourage them to go in the right way. There's only so much you can do. You can't let them drag you down but you need to get out in front and lead. I say lead, and I know not all of our kids are leaders. Sometimes parents stress about that. Oh, I want my kid to be a leader. They're more of a follower. And you know what I say to that? I say, you know what? God wired us to be followers. We're supposed to be followers. The problem is too many people are trying to lead. And really what I would want to teach my kids, my students, when I'm talking to different kids in the youth group, yes, I want them to be a leader in certain ways. Sure. But most importantly, I want to teach them who to follow. Who is worthy to follow? And it's obviously Jesus Christ and others that follow Jesus Christ, but they've got to keep their sights there and be sure they're following the right one. And then they're going to be okay. Yeah, to some of these other issues, it's difficult. You want to help them come along, and they need adult wisdom. Sometimes there just is no other way to say it than that. And so sometimes I'll do little object lessons and things to try to illustrate to them. So I'm not just always telling them. Obviously when we're writing, right, Tony, we're trying to show the story, not just tell the story, because showing's more powerful. And it's the same thing if I'm teaching truth to kids. The more I can show them, the better off I am. So if I want to make a point about dating, I'm going to take them to a used car lot and we're going to talk about something there. If I want to talk about dangers in life, then I've got rat traps and we're going to go into a narrow hallway. I'm going to ask them to take their shoes and socks off. I'm going to blindfold them and spin them around. And I'm going to say, now, would you walk through this hallway? And of course, they're not going to do that. They're smart. Good. What if I said you have to go down this hallway? You must go down this hallway and you're going to be blindfolded. But if I put my hands on your shoulders and you put your hands on my shoulders and I say, I'm going to walk you through, I'm going to keep you from stepping in a trap. Would you trust me? Would you go through with me? Well, chances are they would at that point, a student. And I said, this is life. This is the quarter you're in right now. There are so many traps. And my hope, my prayer is that you get through this corridor without being a cripple. And sometimes people are crippled for the rest of their life because of what happens in their teenage years. And that's the role of parents. We're just guiding you through. Kids want to be free. Parents will set them free. And I want them to know that. They'll set them free in the or then. But in the meantime, you got to be open with them and tell them what's going on so they can keep you from the traps. They're going to keep you from flying when you get on the other end of this. So a lot of it has to do with being an example and trying to give them word pictures or demonstrations of different points. So they can see it and not just hear it.
I love that trap story. I've never heard anybody explain it like that. All right, so as we're starting to hit to wrap up here, what else are you working on right now? You got any new works coming out?
Book 5 is underway. It's published with Focus on the Family in Tyndale in cooperation there, and so it's off to the editor. So we'll get whatever feedback they've got on that. I'm pretty excited about that book. So we've got that. Just finished a new family devotion book, which is all crazy object lessons to teach truth, right? And I've got 2 other projects in my heart, another fiction series. So I'm hoping to flesh that out a little bit and propose that. And what's been on my heart, Tony, for a while is a book for young men about manhood. So I'm not talking about in marriage, but this time, these, the high school graduate, the college graduate, somewhere right in there. And just talk about different aspects of manhood, not the, hey, go chop down a tree, you're a man type of thing. No, I want to talk about the real issues, the deeper issues. I want to talk about the relationship with God, what it means to strengthen themselves in the Lord and why they need that. Talk about self-control, Holy Spirit control. How do we do that? Not just, you need to do this, but it's all about equipping. So we have to show them how. And so that's a challenge to try to write that. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be plenty of things to read from you. So if you have somebody who says, I want to find out how to get this guy's books, where would you like them to go?
Well, they could certainly go to my website, which would be timshoemaker.com. They can go to Amazon, and certainly they would have that, or any Christian bookstore. They could order from there.
Tim, this has been so wonderful having you on. It sounds like your High Water series is extremely captivating, and I've enjoyed having you on the show today, that's for sure.
Oh, Tony, it was great talking with you.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the show. We have been speaking with Tim Shoemaker about his High Water series and about self-destructive behavior and how to handle that, especially in teens. Again, this is Antony Barone Kolenc. If you'd like to learn more about me or any of my works, feel free to check out my website, antonykolenc.com. And until next time, may God bless us as we rely on our faith to work through the messy challenges of our lives.